Attention, duped masses!
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato.
Nuke drills, Wasserman bills, and border bullies. Let's try that again. Nuke drills, Wasserman bills, and border bullies. Plus this day in history with Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance and our song of the day by the church on Your Morning Monarchy for the last day of July 2017. I am James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Good morning. Welcome to wherever you are for news brought to you by you. We are streaming live Monday morning, couple seconds after 9 a.m. coming to you from the very increasingly warm Portland. More on that in just a second. MediaMonarchy.com/listen. Glad you're here. We got the chat rolling. We got all the other action rolling to start a short week of Media Monarchy. So I'll just tell you right here, we are brought to you by you. MediaMonarchy.com/support. PayPal, Patreon, Bitcoin, Post Office Box. Any number of ways that you can help support our independent work. We've been doing Media Monarchy for nearly 12 years. That's a pretty long time, I think. Also, a huge thanks to the Truth Seeker app and RadioConfluence.com. So yes, this will be a short week because we are heading off to Pickathon. Longtime Media Monarchy listeners know we've been working a music festival here in August in Portland. This will be actually our third year where Cassie and I head out there, and it's basically a big music festival outside on a big farm, and there's tons of bands and tons of people, and some of the best parts about it, no advertising and no waste. The bad part about it, it's going to be like 107. Let's take a glance at the breaking lamestream news. So this will be a short week of Media Monarchy. I'll tell you right here at the beginning. I'll tell you throughout the shows. I'll put it in the tweets. I'll put it on the website. But still, there will be people later this week going, hey, where's the show? We're going to do Monday and Tuesday. We're taking the rest of the week off, and we will probably take the entire next week off as well. So we're working Pickathon all of this weekend. Then when we get back, we immediately head on up to Seattle. We're going to go see Belle and Sebastian next week. And then I turn the big 4-0 next Friday, August 11th. So we're taking off from New World next week. No episodes in the next couple of weeks. This is pretty much the best time, I think, to probably take some summertime off. Summertime can be kind of brutal doing internet radio because guess what? Everybody goes away. But you're here, and I'm glad you're here whenever and wherever you are. Love it when you listen live and you can take part in the chat, and it's more of a community that we're trying to grow. But I know that you're later all around the world. Some people in the chat even right now are referring to this as the late show, because that's where they are in the world. Whether you're in a car, in a cube, in a garden, don't care. Big open arms. Glad you're here for a little bit of fear-free news. Monday is World News. We call it hashtag Geopolitics. All the stories you can find using that hashtag. And again, everything we say and play will always be included down in the show notes. Let's take a glance at the breaking lamestream news. Hey, did you guys notice that the head of Homeland Security is now the White House Chief of Staff? Yeah, not cool. More on that in this geopolitics episode. Florida gears up for Tropical Storm Emily. I've got news about Venezuela coming up later in this episode. Alabama jailbreak, 1 inmate at large after 12 escape. And I did just see in the breaking news, the legendary playwright, writer, actor, author, Sam Shepard just passed away. Interestingly enough, this weekend was the final weekend of the Contemporary American Theater Festival, which is actually the festival that Cassie and I kind of met and worked on 15 plus years ago back east in our college town of Shepherdstown, West Virginia. The director there actually has created a theater festival which is actually world renowned, and it's been going on now for 20 years, and they've had world premiere plays by people like Joyce Carol Oates, John Patrick Shanley, all kinds of playwrights, and world premiere plays by Sam Shepard. So R.I.P. Sam Shepard. As we've been doing the last couple of weeks because the lamestream news has added the fact checks, let's check out the fact check. 31-year-old British woman died of cannabis poisoning? Snopes. Is Jennifer Garner turning to Scientology? Gossip Cop. Fact-checking Donald Trump's Long Island speech to law enforcement? PolitiFact. Fact-checking Trump's rally in Ohio? Fact check. Trump's embrace of African-American employment data he once scorned? The Bezos Post. So now you have been fact-checked. And the other piece of breaking news I'll throw into the stack today, this Wednesday could be the hottest day in Portland history. Portland hasn't hit 107 degrees since 1981. And before that, it was 1940. So it's going to be hot. And anybody that knows me knows I don't really like the hot. So that's another great reason to probably take a little bit of time off from work. Let's now dive in, my friends, to your geopolitics news. That's Monday news. Hashtag geopolitics with a K. That way we kind of own that hashtag. Donald Trump is to order a military strike against North Korea within a year. We got a whole year. after Kim Jong-un's military boasted it fired a ballistic missile capable of hitting the U.S. And that's kind of what we were heading into the weekend with those North Korea missile tests. I think we even mentioned them on Friday's Pump Up the Volume. Senior military sources in Washington have reportedly claimed Pentagon officials will have laid out plans to obliterate a nuclear weapons facility operating deep within a mountain range inside the rogue state that other rogue agents have helped them get rogue weapons. The news comes hours after the U.S. flew 2 supersonic bombers over the Korean peninsula in a show of force against North Korea. The B-1 bombers were escorted by South Korean fighter jets as they performed a low pass over an air base near the South Korean capital of Seoul before returning to the Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. You might remember us mentioning Guam because of all of the, of course, pedophile scandals, and murders and things. U.S. Air Force said the mission was a response to consecutive ICBM missile tests by Kim this month. Analysts say flight data from the second test conducted Friday showed that a broader part of American mainland, including Los Angeles and Chicago, is now in range of Pyongyang's weapons. Be afraid, be very afraid. Except you're more likely to be killed by not the North Korean government. Who's laying awake at night worrying that North Korea is going to kill us all? Very few people, and probably people who get all of their news and information from one of the same 3 corporate outlets, whose business it is to hype up war and fear. That's good weapon sales, for all their advertisers. And board members, of course. Diplomacy remains the lead. However, we have a responsibility to our allies and our nation to showcase our unwavering commitment while planning for the worst-case scenario. So it is a big, giant show-off. It's what our buddy Ray Vahi said in the tweets. And again, we are not only crowdfunded, we are crowdsourced. Our news is brought to you by you. Huge thanks on today's episode, Ray Vahi and Sean Cathcart giving us the lion's share of our news. Someone wants us to know about a North Korea nuke drill. They want you to know about it. They want you to hear about it. They want you to be afraid about it. If called upon, we are ready to respond with rapid, lethal, and overwhelming force at a time and place of our choosing. How many presidents have essentially said the same warmongering tripe? The United States often sends powerful warplanes in times of heightened animosities with North Korea. B-1 bombers have been sent to South Korea for flyovers several times this year in response to North Korea's banned missile tests and also following the death of a U.S. college student after he was released by North Korean in a coma. We covered that story. Oh, here's your kid back. Yeah, sorry, he's in a coma. Oh, wait, he's dead. So more show-off. U.S. military, U.S. Missile Defense Agency, and U.S. Army soldiers of the 11th Air Defense and Artillery Brigade from Fort Bliss conducted a successful missile defense test using Terminal High Altitude Area Defense THAAD missile system. Statement read and cited by NBC. A medium-range target ballistic missile, MRBM, was launched by a U.S. Air Force C-17 over the Pacific Ocean. The announcement said, adding further, that part of the THAAD system stationed in Alaska pinpointed and intercepted the target. The flight experiment THAAD testing was aimed at gathering threat data from a THAAD interceptor in flight, according to the military. The launch also allowed necessary data to be collected. The THAAD test was conducted just 2 days after North Korea fired an ICBM. Following the launch, the U.S. and South Korean militaries responded by firing surface-to-surface missiles and increasing tensions on the peninsula. Hey, there's fire. What should we do? Oh, I don't know. Let's throw a bunch of gasoline on it. And then we've got this morning, where America's next top president, again, and we'll have this story in just a few minutes, replaced his chief of staff with the head of Homeland Security. That should tell you the situation that we're in. And it's just par for the course. Oh my God, I've never seen anything like this cult of personality surrounding Trump, except from the previous president. And people said about the previous president, oh my God, I can't believe how many wars this guy started. Oh, he's just continuing the wars the guy before him started. Oh my God, that guy before him, he was such a dummy. He really denigrated and degraded the office. What? Don't you remember the guy before him? He really degraded the office with Hummers and cigars and all that garbage. And don't forget, of course, the war and lies. We've been saying this a bunch, and I know this is preaching to the choir, so to speak, but it's probably mostly our coworkers and friends and family who just now acted like everything went to shit on November 9th. They have not been paying attention at all. Not for the last 16 years, let alone 40. So this morning, as America's next top president moved the head of Homeland Security to essentially the head of the White House, they all have a nice little sit-down meeting where they say, we'll handle North Korea.
Good morning. This is our first cabinet meeting with General Kelly. He will be Chief of Staff. As you know, we all know him. We respect him, admire what he's done. And at Homeland, what he has done has been nothing short of miraculous. As you know, the border was a tremendous problem, and now close to 80% stoppage. And even the president of Mexico called me. They said their southern border, very few people are coming because they know they're not going to get through our border, which is the ultimate compliment. So I just want to congratulate him on the great job he's done with Homeland Security, and I have no doubt that he will be an absolutely superb Chief of Staff. We were discussing a little while ago before the meeting how well we're doing, however. We have the highest stock market in history. We have GDP on Friday, got very little mention, although I guess in the business areas it did, but got, I think, very little mention. 2.6 is a number that nobody thought they'd see for a long period of time. Remember, I was saying we will hit 3 at some point in the not too distant future, and everybody smiled and they laughed and they thought it would be at 1, and 2.6 is an unbelievable number announced on Friday. Unemployment is the lowest it's been in 17 years. Business enthusiasm is about as high as they've ever seen it. In fact, it is as high, the highest point in 28 years, according to a certain graph and a certain chart. The manufacturers the enthusiasm level is incredible. We have a lot of tremendous things going. We have some interesting situations that we'll handle. North Korea, Middle East, lots of problems that we inherited from previous administrations, but we'll take care of them. We'll take care of them very well. But overall, I think we're doing incredibly well. The economy is doing incredibly well.
Get to the North Korea part.
Many other things. So we're starting from a really good base. I predict that General Kelly will go down in terms of the position of Chief of Staff, one of the great ever, and we're going to have a good time, but much more importantly, we're going to work hard, and we're going to make America great again. It's all about making America great again. That's what we're going to do. That's what I said. That's how we won this big election, and that's what we're in the process of doing and continuing. And General, it's really great to have you on board, and thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Mr. President, what about North Korea?
We'll handle North Korea. We're going to be able to handle them. It will be handled. We handle everything. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that was a big bunch of nothing. Bunch of yap. Bunch of Trumpographics. But really, very succinct, very brilliant statement in the chat while we were listening to that very nothing clip from our buddy Crimson Mist points out, the role of the president is not to wield power, but to draw attention away from it. Truer words were never spoken, my friends. You are listening to The Morning Monarchy for the last day of July 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com, and we are streaming live at MediaMonarchy.com/listen. We are news brought to you by you. The U.S. House of Representatives, all the little Congress critters, voted overwhelmingly to pass new sanctions against Russia and require congressional approval before Trump can ease or remove existing ones. The bill also includes sanctions against Iran and North Korea, of course. Quote-unquote lawmakers voted 419 to 3. I bet we could probably guess who those 3 were. Although anybody that was halfway decent isn't really in there anymore. Lawmakers voted 419 to 3 to approve legislation seeking to punish Russia over a host of issues, including its alleged meddling in the 2016 presidential election, its support for the Syrian government, and alleged support for the rebels in Ukraine, as well as Crimea's accession to Russia. If signed into law, the measure will effectively cement the existing sanctions against Russia by requiring the administration to get permission from Congress before lifting or easing the sanction penalties against Moscow. Isn't it really interesting when American Congress decides to get their balls? It empowers Congress to review and disapprove any sanctions relief, said Representative Ed Royce, Republican out of California, on the House floor ahead of that vote. Congress has the power to do most everything in America. And again, much like that saying, the president's job is not to show power, but to draw attention away from it. Because he doesn't actually have that much power. He's not supposed to have that much power. But again, while you were all afraid of 9/11 and boogie terrorists, you were letting Baby Bush change a lot of the laws to draw all that power into the unitary executive. And then you know who got that? The next puppet. That's the thing that's so frustrating. And I know that's what's frustrating with a lot of you out there with your families. A lot of us can say, man, I've only been paying attention to this for 5, 10, 15 years. You've been watching this bullshit for 40, 50, 60 years, and you still believe this show? You think 4 to 8 years is going to change anything? Please wake up. To reverse each of the sanctions, the administration would have to provide evidence and certify that the conditions prompted them to have them removed. Evidence and certification, not real huge things the U.S. does. Having secured well over 2/3 of the legislature's votes, the bill is effectively veto-proof, meaning lawmakers have enough votes to override any veto, potentially, by the president. Despite expressing doubts about Russia's alleged interference in his election selection, Trump train would sign the legislation, White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said on Sunday. That's going in with a lot of the other switcheroos and change-arounds. No, she's not related to Bernie, but she is related to Christian fundamentalist Mike Huckabee. And this has been that rush in the White House. All the neocons back in, all filling the swamp. We got even more Goldman Sachs banksters coming up at the end of this episode. So things aren't looking real great. But I suppose things have never looked real great. And the powers that shouldn't be, again, want you to give all to them. Remember, they make the rules. They make the reality. And while we're trying to figure it all out, they'll just change it again, right? Vladimir Putin said yesterday that the United States would have to cut 755 diplomatic staff in Russia and warned of a prolonged gridlock in its ties after the U.S. Congress backed new sanctions against the Kremlin. So this is the tit for tat. The Russian president added bluntly that Russia was able to raise the stakes with America even further, although he hoped this would be unnecessary. A U.S. State Department official denounced the move as a regrettable and uncalled-for act, adding that Washington was now weighing their potential tat for tit. On Friday, the Russian Foreign Ministry demanded Washington cut its diplomatic presence in Russia by September 1st to 455, the same number that Moscow has in the U.S. More than 1,000 people, diplomats, and technical personnel were working and are still working at the U.S. Embassy and consulates, Putin said in an interview with Russia 24 television. 755 people must stop their activities in Russia. The U.S. State Department would not confirm the number of U.S. officials serving at the mission, but that's coming up in a second. Putin added that an upturn in Russia's relations with Washington could not be expected anytime soon. We've waited long enough, hoping the situation would perhaps change for the better, but it seems that even if the situation is changing, it's not for any time soon. Putin warned that Russia could further ratchet up the pressure, but he hoped this would not be needed. Russia still has things to say and is able to further restrict areas of common activities, which may be sensitive for the American side. The law now goes to U.S. President Donald Trump, who made an improvement in ties with Russia, a plank in his election campaign, a position that his critics said was inexplicable. As of 2013, the U.S. mission in Russia, including the Moscow embassy and consulates in St. Petersburg, Vladivostok, other places I won't try and pronounce, employing 1,279 staff, according to State Department's Inspector General's report last year. That included 934 locally employed staff and 301 U.S. direct hire staff from 35 U.S. government agencies. That's how the bureaucracy works. That's how the little Eichmanns get all that money. That breakdown suggested, though, that the actual number of Americans forced to leave Russia would be far, far, far less than 755. We don't have 755 American diplomats in Russia, said Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia. The cuts would likely affect how quickly the U.S. is able to process Russian applications for U.S. visas. If these cuts are real, Russians should expect to wait weeks, if not months, to get visas to come to the U.S. Russia also froze 2 U.S. embassy compounds, a Moscow summer home, and a storage facility in the city from August 1st. I thought that we should show that we are not going to stand by without a response. The baseless measures taken by the American side. So here's the part. In December, Obama ordered 35 Russian diplomats out and closed down 2 embassy summer houses that Washington said were being used by Moscow for espionage. At the time, the Kremlin said it would put any retaliation on hold until after the Trump train took office. High on a list of U.S. grievances is the allegation that Russian operatives blah-blah-blah-blah bling bling bloom. You've heard that song many, many times. It's a terrible, terrible cover version. I do enjoy, and this is, I think, what Patton Oswalt pointed out when Obama was elected. It's like we've got a Star Wars world dictator Jamba Juice name for a president. Barack Hussein Obama. Then we get some of these other crazy names. I think every time I've seen the name Reince Priebus, I think they're talking about some new Disney Star Wars movie. Reince Priebus. Reincepriebus. As Donald Trump's chief of staff attempted to serve 2 masters, Trump himself and establishment Republican crony elites. This all made him terribly inefficient, something that was not a complete negative from a libertarian perspective when there was little in terms of liberty being advanced by the administration. Gridlock sometimes is the best you can hope for, and that's something that Webster Tarpley talked about years ago. We always hear our politicians say, we got to do something. It's like, do something. That sounds like a bad idea. Do something usually means you're going to do something to me. I'd rather you guys did nothing. If anything, Priebus was a minor plus by blocking the more anti-trade and domestic crackdown instincts of the Trump train. Boston Globe's Michael A. Cohen tells us that the new chief of staff, John Kelly, is, quote, unhinged. Last week, Kelly delivered one of the most unhinged speeches you'll hear from a cabinet secretary. It was a terrifying reminder of the depths this administration will sink in order to sell its toxic policies. Kelly jumped out of the crazy tree and hit every branch on the way down. In discussing his agency's mission, Kelly said this, "Make no mistake, we are a nation under attack. We are under attack from criminals who think their greed justifies raping young girls at knife point, dealing poison to our youth, or killing just for fun." You probably shouldn't talk about the military that way, buddy. We're under attack from people who hate us, hate our freedoms, hate our laws, hate our values, hate the way we simply live our lives, which is why since 9/11 you've worked very hard with all your cronies to destroy all those freedoms and create laws that people hate. Since 9/11, approximately 94 people have been killed on U.S. soil by jihadist terrorists, a bit more than the number of Americans killed every single day with gun violence. This is the Michael Cohen pushback. Cyber terrorists have never killed an American citizen. But I'm sure those drone operators have killed lots of little kids and reporters. And civilians. But then from the Washington Compost, John Kelly did not gel with the previous administration, and his career ended on a sour note in January 2016 after he repeatedly clashed with the Obama White House. Officials there had grown tired of the 4-star general speaking off message about the president's plan to shut down the prison in Guantanamo Bay, about the perceived vulnerability of America's borders, about the threat posed to American interests by any number of terrorist organizations. Their relationship had become so strained that in the weeks before he retired, multiple administration officials went to the media and accused Kelly and other military leaders of endeavoring to undermine the Guantanamo closure plan. Mission accomplished. Kelly's long argued that transnational organized crime is the greatest threat to U.S. national security. The Obama White House didn't always appreciate it, but Trump couldn't agree more. Now, this writer on Target Liberty says they don't fear terrorists in the U.S., but they do fear a White House that will trample on our freedoms to fight imaginary threats, and John Kelly appears to lead the pack in terms of seeing threats under every single rock. Give me the incompetent establishment lackey Reince Priebus any day. Kelly replacing Priebus as chief of staff is not a move in the direction of liberty, and the move should be condemned by every lover of liberty. But yet, let's listen to Reince Priebus still kiss Trump's ass when he's on with Blitzer.
A situation where there's a bunch of ill will feelings. This is, I think, good for the president. I think it's smart for him to pick General Kelly And I think that things are going to be run very well.
You say you resigned yesterday. Tell us why. Why did you make that important decision to resign?
Well, it was something that I've always talked to the president about, which is, and I've always said to him, and he always agreed with me, anytime either one of us think that we need to make a change or move in a different direction, let's just talk about it and get it done. And so I think the president thought about that, and we talked about it yesterday, and I resigned and he accepted my resignation. But this is about the president. It's about moving his agenda forward. I think he's made a smart decision with General Kelly, and I think he's going to do a great job. And I'm looking forward to the future. One other thing, I'm always going to be a Trump fan. I'm on Team Trump, and I look forward to helping him achieve his goals and his agenda for the American people.
There you have it. You're listening to The Morning Monarchy for Monday, July 31st, 2017. Again, I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Glad you're here for a little bit of fear-free news. Monday is world news, geopolitics, and the rapidly unfolding Awan brothers saga took another turn. A new report published last night by Daily Caller reveals Imran Awan was frantically liquidating real estate holdings on the day of his arrest. This from the Daily Caller. Imran Awan, a congressional aide arrested by the FBI after wiring $300,000 to Pakistan and misrepresenting the purpose, had previously wired money to the Muslim country and was frantically liquidating multiple real estate properties on the day he was arrested. Imran's real estate properties provide a source of money that could be sent directly to Pakistan when 2 upcoming home sales close. Prosecutors have since filed paperwork saying they fear the dissipation of the proceeds of the fraud and destruction of evidence in other locations. Imran was arrested July 24th, 4 months after the FBI says his wife, Hina Alvi, moved to Pakistan after learning the family was the subject of a criminal investigation into their work as IT administrators for House Democrats. On the day of Imran's arrest, the couple accepted a buyer for one house owned by Hina with an asking price of $618,000 and listed another property for sale at $200,000. On June 20th, a third house his wife owned was sold to his brother-in-law for $360,000. In November 2016, a fourth home his wife owned was sold to brother Jamal for $620,000. In both cases, the bank financed nearly all of the purchases. Gateway Pundit previously reported Debbie Wasserman Schultz planned to pay IT staffer Imran Awan even while he lived in Pakistan had he not been arrested by the FBI at Dulles Airport last Monday. Congressional payroll records also suggest that Wasserman Schultz knew Imran's wife, a fellow IT staffer, left the U.S. months ago while she was a criminal suspect. Wasserman knew they were fleeing the country. Awan booked a round-trip ticket to Pakistan in July and planned to depart last Monday, with a return ticket in 6 months. He was arrested at Dulles, which is always the great name to hang over everything, the old boys. The Associated Press reported that Awan's lawyer, Chris Gowan, said Awan had informed the House of his plans to visit his family. Wasserman Schultz spokesman cited Awan's Monday arrest as the reason for ending his employment on Tuesday. Upon learning of his arrest, he was terminated. The office's insistence that his termination was prompted by the Monday arrest and not the House Sergeant-at-Arms banning him and his wife from touching congressional computers or his 6 months in Pakistan suggests that he boarded the flight without incident. He would still be on the payroll. Does that mean if he had boarded the flight as planned, the office would have been paying him for 6 months while he was abroad? The Daily Caller investigative group asked Wasserman Schultz spokesman Thursday, why would it do that? Spokesman did not respond. Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Now, we reported for you, I believe, on Thursday's episode that Wasserman in archaic English is basically a big sea monster. Wasserman Schultz knows she's in hot water over this IT scandal. The Gateway Pundit previously reported the FBI seized smashed hard drives belonging to Imran Awan. They've also reported that Debbie Wasserman Schultz threatened the chief of the U.S. Capitol Police with consequences for holding equipment that she says belonged to her in order to build a criminal case against Pakistani IT staffer suspected of massive cybersecurity breaches. John Cardillo reported, Florida politicos who have known Wasserman Schultz for years are telling me she's a nervous wreck, barely able to function since Imran's arrest. And of course, the fake news media cable networks have completely shut down coverage on this massive scandal ever since Seth Rich was murdered. Why was Wasserman Schultz so loyal to the Awan family? Why would she continue to pay a man who's no longer providing a service? Why were they paid over $4 million over the course of their employment, even though they were accused of running a cybersecurity breach? One main reason is because they know that the DNC wasn't hacked by the Russians. These IT staffers have all the dirt on the underbelly of the DNC, and essentially, almost the easiest way to think about it is that the Awan brothers are the Russian hackers. And it gets even stranger. You think that pulling the "do you know who I am" card is big? What if we got into the element of faked phone calls? And we're getting deep now, and this gets into the elements of deep parapolitical action. Thinking about the allegedly faked phone calls on 9/11. And while we're thinking about 9/11, and while we're thinking about geopolitics, of course, who comes back but Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, a.k.a. Abel Danger. Tony Schaefer alleged on Fox News that the Awan brothers may have aided Debbie Wasserman Schultz in making bizarre voice-modulated phone calls to the offices of attorneys currently pursuing a litigation class action lawsuit against Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the DNC. If substantiated, the claims may have significance for the DNC fraud lawsuit proceedings and add to the growing controversy surrounding the arrest of Imran Awan on bank fraud charges. According to DNC counsel, on record in the DNC fraud lawsuit, voice change call to Beck and Lee was referred to the Capitol Police. Let's just listen to Anthony Schaefer talk about faked phone calls in the Wasserman fraud.
Conspiracy theories.
This is more like a Quentin Tarantino movie with everything except the GIMP, and I think the GIMP's still going to show up.
Good. I hated the GIMP in that movie.
Look, this is complex, and let me try to simplify it. Basically, Debbie Wasserman Schultz has employed 3 brothers who are of Pakistani origin at 3 times the salary of everybody else who does IT on Capitol Hill. And this all started years ago.
They must be really good at their job.
Well, apparently they failed at working at Best Buy and other places. So I guess if you fail at Best Buy, you get to be hired by the Hill.
Were they at Best Buy?
I can't remember which one. It was one of those outlets. Now, what happened, though, is that she's employed these folks, and over the past years, there's been real issues regarding the fact that every other Democrat person they worked for on the Hill fired them. But they were retained by her. Now, what is really key here to remember, Laura, it's not about hard drives. It's about the fact that these individuals, during the time they worked for her on Capitol Hill, in her position there as a member of Congress.
3 brothers, Pakistani origin, which is not in and of itself a bad thing at all.
Had massive access to all sorts of databases, to include email of other members of Congress, super user access to the system itself, and most importantly, the sensitive information being held by the House Foreign Affairs Committee and other committees that they had access to. What this all comes down to is like, okay, you could have all that, but what gets worse is she actually employs these folks apparently to do hideous things behind the scenes. There's evidence now that at least one of these brothers was helping her do the Bernie Sanders malevolent activities of trying to manipulate things against him. They actually helped her do things like voice change calls. They actually did all these other things, which
who are these characters?
And then
who are they?
They dumped. Then there's evidence now that all this information they had access to dumped off into a third database, which is now being called a breach. So that's why the Capitol Hill police rolled in saying there's something wrong here. And now the FBI has rolled in. And let me give you the big takeaway here. It looks like a foreign intelligence service may be the recipient of all this, and something called the Muslim Brotherhood. So
whoa. The Muslim Brotherhood and
Brotherhood.
Debbie. They're going to really say it's conspiracy theory
really
now.
Conspiracy now, but that's where apparently all this has been going in law enforcement. That's why the FBI is now investigating beyond the wire
these brothers have been kicking around Capitol Hill in various capacities for IT, but they essentially were blacklisted by most of the other Democrats, correct?
Right.
But yet she gave them a home.
She gave them a home.
Interesting.
And they actually suspended most of their access in February of this year, and she kept them on anyway. So
she's just a very nice person. Apparently it's a jobs program over there at the DNC.
That $300,000 being kicked over to Pakistan finally was the straw that broke the camel's back.
But his wife is gone. She's safely over there in Pakistan. Lieutenant, keep covering it for us. Lieutenant Colonel Schaefer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Where did you get this? The alternative media, Jerry. That's where you hear the truth.
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato.
You are listening to The Morning Monarchy. I'm James Evan Pilato, your host, webmaster, DJ, and so much more. It basically sounds like blackmail. Why would you keep people on after they've already been under investigation and keep paying them? Sounds like blackmail to me. Sounds like they have lots of dirt. And that's how these gangsters go. We don't really subscribe to the unified field conspiracy theory. Oh, it's all the blank. But of course, any comment section you look at, they've got it all figured out. It is all the blank. It's like little competing organized crime gangster groups. They jockey for territory and some turf, and occasionally they'll even bump each other off, and it looks like they're really heated, but basically what they're going to do is keep the scam rolling, and they're not going to do anything that calls the entire game into question. The Donald Trump administration added another member of the Goldman Sachs Alumni Association to its roster when it was announced that financier Louis Eisenberg would be the next ambassador to Italy. That's a pretty sweet gig. Eisenberg was also the chairman of the Trump Victory Fund, which coordinated fundraising between Trump's campaign and that of the Republican National Committee. Although the nomination was announced in January of 2017, it wasn't made official until July 10th. Eisenberg was born in Chicago in 1942 to Estelle and Seymour Eisenberg. He got a BA at Dartmouth in '64 and an MBA at Cornell in '66. Immediately after graduation, Eisenberg went to work for Goldman Sachs. He advanced to be the co-head of the firm's equity sales division and a partner. He resigned in November 1989 after a civil lawsuit was filed in the state Supreme Court in Manhattan accusing him of harassing a former assistant, Kathy Abraham, after she tried to end a 7-year extramarital affair. Abraham later received a settlement and recanted her claims. The following year, he co-founded equity firm Granite Capital, of which he is co-chair and private equity chief. On one day in February 2007, Eisenberg made $356 million on the initial public offering of ITC Holdings, an electricity transmission company. He also founded Granum Communications. Eisenberg's day job hadn't kept him out of the political world. In '93, he was one of the co-founders of the Republican Leadership Council, a relatively moderate group that incurred the wrath of Republican conservatives. In 1995, he was named chair of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, a post he held when the agency's World Trade Center was attacked on September 11, 2001. At that time, Eisenberg was considering a run for the U.S. Senate from Jersey, but instead he left the Port Authority shortly after the attacks for a seat on the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation Board. In 2002, he was also named finance chairman of the Republican Party for the first time. Eisenberg's relative moderation made him a surprising choice in some corners of the George W. Bush administration, but he compensated for his politics with a long list of potential donors. In 2000 and 2004, he was the New Jersey chair for George W. Bush presidential campaign. Eisenberg raised $500,000 for John McCain in 2008. Including $146,000 that he contributed through Granite Capital. Eisenberg left the GOP in 2004, only to come back to it in 2015 as the party was gearing up for the 2016 show. Eisenberg backed Jeb early in the campaign, but later donated to Trump-related committees. He was finance co-chair of Trump's inauguration committee, and there was some talk that Eisenberg might be in line for a little cabinet post in the Trump position. Oh, but you have to settle for an Italian ambassadorship. Maybe he can meet up with God's banker. In addition to his work at Granite Capital, since 2009, Eisenberg has been a senior advisor at KKR. That's right, Kohlberg, Kravis & Roberts, equity firm specializing in buyouts, mergers, murders, and executions. He is a co-founder and managing partner of Iron Hill Investments. Eisenberg has also been active in Jewish causes, having, among other activities, been the executive director of the Jewish Chautauqua Society, which sponsored courses in Judaic studies at universities. Eisenberg met his wife Judy in college in '62. They married in '65. They have 3 daughters, Lisa, Stacy, and Laura, and 10 grandchildren, and they live in Vero Beach, Florida. U.S. Ambassador to Italy. Who is Lou Eisenberg? Well, I think you know now. The last couple of stories will send us all around the world of geopolitics. Declassified documents released last week shed light on the Central Intelligence Agency's role in the 1953 coup that brought down Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, fueling a surge of nationalism which culminated in the 1979 Iranian Revolution and poisoning U.S.-Iran relations into the 21st century. The approximately 1,000 pages of documents also reveal for the first time the details of how the CIA attempted to call off the failing coup, only to be salvaged at the last minute by an insubordinate spy on the ground. That's right, known as Operation Ajax, the CIA plot was ultimately about oil. What crazy conspiracy theory site are we getting this from? Oh, just foreign policy. Western firms had for decades controlled the region's oil wealth, whether Arabian American Oil Company in Saudi Arabia or the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company in Iran. When the U.S. firm in Saudi Arabia bowed to pressure in late 1950 and agreed to share oil revenues evenly with Riyadh, the British concession in Iran came under intense pressure to follow suit, but London adamantly refused. So in early 51, amid great popular acclaim, Mossadegh nationalized Iran's oil industry. A fuming UK began conspiring with U.S. intelligence services to overthrow Mossadegh and restore the monarchy under the Shah. 64 years later, the CIA finally releases details of the Iranian coup. And what a shocker. Oil, you say? I can't believe we'd overthrow a government over oil. Shocked. Shocked, I tell you. Shut up, you crazy conspiracy theorist. You'll only be proven right 50 years later. Meanwhile, let's continue to look at Venezuela. Venezuelan electoral authorities said more than 8 million people voted Sunday to create a constitutional assembly endowing President Nicolas Maduro's ruling Socialist Party with virtually unlimited powers. A report more than double the estimates of independent experts and opposition leaders who met the announcement with fury and derision. More than 8 million grant government more power, which is really funny because most of the reports coming out ahead of time said people are staying away. People are staying away. They're protesting it. They don't want to change the Constitution. They don't want to become a complete socialist meltdown that they are already in. Meanwhile, let's head on over to the Philippines. A city mayor and at least 11 others were killed in the Philippines on Sunday in one of the bloodiest anti-drug assaults so far under President Rodrigo Duterte's crackdown. Philippine mayor on Duterte's list of top drug suspects. That's how I make the word drug suspects. It's a little portmanteau for you. Shot dead. Daughter arrested. Philippine mayor accused of involvement in narcotics trafficking shot dead. Reynaldo Paranojing is the latest official to be killed in Duterte's war on drugs. He was killed along with his wife, big brother, and 9 others during the raid. Campaigners have accused Duterte of unleashing a human rights calamity. Meanwhile, other people just think, yeah, he's just like the South American Trump. So for our last big story, it is a disturbing one. As we head down to the border, disturbing government surveillance video released this week sparks outrage from Congress and the public alike. The video shows 2 U.S. border agents encourage a 16-year-old boy to drink liquid meth until he dies.
We're going to bring in our chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross, right now with some newly obtained video. Takes us inside an encounter between U.S. border agents and a Mexican teen. When it was over, the teen was dead. Brian is here with this pretty shocking story. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, George, and it is. This story is about U.S. border officers accused of outrageous conduct in dealing with a high school student trying to bring drugs into the country. All caught in gripping detail on a video obtained by ABC News that the government did not want the public to see.
It's 6:21 on a Monday evening at the San Ysidro, California border crossing. And the man in the white sweatshirt is a smuggler, a 16-year-old high school student by the name of Cruz Velasquez, with drugs hidden in 2 bottles in his shoulder bag.
Cruz was recruited, we believe, as a mule. Here, we'll give you $100 or $200 if you just take these bottles across the border.
But things go bad almost immediately. The young man appears nervous, and these 2 Customs and Border Protection officers start to examine the 2 bottles in his bag.
So they know that there's something funny, there's something fishy.
What's in the bottles is highly concentrated methamphetamine dissolved in liquid. But instead of conducting a standard field test, the 2 officers encourage, or at least permit the young man to prove it's just juice, as the family lawyer takes us through the video.
Cruz now points at the bottle and she's saying, okay, drink it. And she makes the gesture that we associate with to drink. Now watch the male agent. He says, drink another one. You see them exchanging glances and smiles because they know what's going on. This is a game in which he's being played with.
It happens again and again.
2 more sips. And you see the smile.
A total of 4 swallows in all of the highly toxic solution, something the officers will later say under oath the teenager volunteered to do.
I never asked him to. He volunteered to.
and I believe I gestured to him to go ahead.
You told him to go ahead and drink on more than one occasion, did you not?
No.
And you're sure of that?
I'm sure.
But the government video obtained by ABC News seems to contradict that. Now Velasquez can barely stand, sweating profusely.
I noticed some labored breathing, and he was shaking a lot. I remember putting my hand on him and just told him to, relax.
It will be more than a half hour after the first drink until the officers call for a team of paramedics. A fateful delay.
Cruz Velasquez died about an hour later of a massive overdose. The government paid $1 million to settle a lawsuit brought by his family with no apology or admission of wrongdoing. There was no prosecution, no punishment, not even a reprimand for the 2 officers who remain on the job to this day, George.
I can think of no better story that illustrates the trickle-down psychopathy that we're faced with. So in some ways, to try and transition into Tuesday's Tech Tuesday coverage that we call Cyberspace War, a wide array of Wisconsin environmental regulations would be waived in an effort to speed up construction of a $10 billion Foxconn electronics factory under a proposal by Governor Scott Walker. He unveiled it Friday. Walker called on the Republican-controlled legislature to consider the measure as early as Tuesday. And what would this be? The plant would be the first outside Asia to produce LCD monitors, liquid crystal display monitors used in computers, televisions, and other areas. Walker calls it a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform Wisconsin's economy so you, too, can make fondle slabs at a depressing factory job. There you have it. That's all our geopolitics news. You can find all of those stories again. An hour before showtime, we tweet out the stories we're going to talk about. And then if you're listening later, of course, all the show notes are right there. All right there. We're going to go out today with brand new music from the legendary band called The Church. But first, let's take a look at this day in history, my friends. If I say nothing else from these shows, past is prologue. July 31st, 1703, Daniel Defoe is placed in a pillory for the crime of seditious libel after publishing a politically satirical pamphlet, but is pelted with flowers. July 31st, 1790, the first U.S. patent is issued to inventor Samuel Hopkins for a potash process. Basically potassium growing stuff. July 31st, 1874, Dr. Patrick Francis Healy becomes the first African-American inaugurated as president of a predominantly white university on this day in 1874. July 31st, 1932, the NASDAP. That's the National Socialist Worker Party, the Nazi Party. They get 38% plus of the vote in the German elections. July 31st, 1942, Harry James and his orchestra recorded I've Heard That Song Before with Helen Forrest on vocals. July 31st, 1969, a Moscow police chief reported that thousands of Moscow telephone booths had been made inoperable by thieves who had stolen phone parts in order to convert their acoustic guitars to electric. That's pretty good this day in history. July 31st, 1970, they call it Black Tot Day, the last day of the officially sanctioned rum ration in the UK Royal Navy. Used to get a comfortable buzz while you were out killing little kids for Empire. July 31st, 1975. Teamsters president Jimmy Hoffa is reported missing in Detroit, Michigan. He was last seen alive in a parking lot outside the Machus Red Fox restaurant the previous afternoon. To this day, Hoffa's fate remains a mystery, although many believe that he was murdered by organized crime figures. Whether or not they were just gangsters or government ones, we don't know.
History that's plagued the nation for 40 years. What happened to Jimmy Hoffa? Today marks the exact date the Teamsters boss disappeared from a Detroit area restaurant.
And this morning, 24 Hour News 8's Tom Hillen is in studio with us with where this case stands today. This is a long running mystery, Tom.
This is one of those great American unsolved mysteries everyone's waiting for the answer to. Hundreds of thousands of man hours and millions of dollars have gone into sorting through countless tips while trying to crack the case of Hoffa's disappearance. This investigation is still considered a missing persons case because there is no concrete evidence that Hoffa was ever killed. However, most investigators and crime experts believe that Hoffa was murdered in a mafia hit. The Detroit FBI field office says they get new tips on the case every month or two. An expert that has studied the case says Hoffa, who wanted back into power with the Teamsters, was to meet with two powerful alleged mafia members who could help make that happen. That meeting was supposed to happen on July 30th, 1975. Well, those men never showed up to the restaurant in Metro Detroit where the meeting was supposed to take place. Hoffa was then last seen leaving the restaurant in a car occupied by three men. In January of 2013, the FBI received what could have been the most high-profile tip ever. Tony Zerilli, who was alleged to have been Detroit's mafia boss, said Hoffa was buried in Oakland County, not far from that restaurant. But that search also turned up nothing, and Zerilli died in March. Today, Hoffa would have been 102 years old, and most of the possible suspects and witnesses in this case have died. Investigators say the handful of people still alive who may know anything of value are in their mid to late 70s. Amanda.
So that's not actually, that news report was from Valentine's Day, 2015. So it's actually 42 years ago since Jimmy Hoffa vanished on this day. Yeah, concrete evidence indeed. July 31st, 1972, in Operation Motorman, the British Army retakes the urban no-go areas of Northern Ireland. It is the biggest British military operation since the Suez Crisis of '56 and the biggest in Ireland since the Irish War of Independence. Later that day, 9 civilians killed by car bombs in the village of Cloudy. All a part of the Troubles. July 31st, 1976, Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper was released on this day. July 31st, 1992, Thai Airways International Flight 311 crashes into a mountain north of Kathmandu, killing all 113 people on board, which is the flight number backwards. July 31st, 1999, NASA intentionally crashes the Lunar Prospector into the moon, thus ending its mission to detect frozen water on the moon's surface. Blow up the moon, like Mr. Show. July 31st, 2006, Fidel Castro handed over power to his brother Raul. 2007, again with the Troubles. July 31st, 2007, Operation Banner, the presence of the British Army in Northern Ireland and the longest-running British Army operation ever, came to an end this day a decade ago. And July 31st, 2012, bong hit champion Michael Phelps breaks the record set in 1964 by Larissa Latinia for the most medals won at the Olympics. Published to my own website a decade ago today, American moves to Canada reach record high. The number of Americans admitted to Canada reached a 30-year high. That was in 2007. Oh, that's right. That was that other puppet president that people didn't like. Pendulum keeps swinging back and forth, but it's always connected to that same corrupt clock. Second story, Iran asked Japan to pay yen for oil. Iran asked Japanese refiners to switch to the yen to pay for all crude oil purchases after Iran's central bank said it is reducing holdings of the U.S. dollar. Third and final post published to my own website a decade ago today. The Department of Defense is planning to implant microchips in soldiers' brains for monitoring their health information and has already awarded a $1.6 million contract to the Center for Bioelectronics, Biosensors, and Transhumanism. Pentagon to implant microchips in soldiers, published a decade ago to MediaMonarchy.com. You might also remember that from 2 weeks ago on New World Next Week. Past is prologue. Celebrating birthdays today, July 31st. Animator, producer extraordinaire, we've all seen his name 1,000 times. It's at the beginning of cartoons. Fred Quimby. It's also Milton Friedman, born on this day. Nobel Prize laureate and American economist, born on this day in 1912. Atlantic Records genius Ahmet Ertegun, Turkish-American songwriter, producer, and founder of Atlantic Records. Ahmet Ertegun, born on this day in 1923. It's also jazz guitarist legend Kenny Burrell's birthday, born on this day in 1931. Crazed Republican GOP conservative Bill Bennett, William Bennett, Mr. Drug War, American journalist, politician, and third United States Secretary of Education, born on this day. It's also Lobo's birthday, singer-songwriter Daniel Ash, who you might know from Bauhaus and Love and Rockets. Bill Berry, ex-REM drummer. He decided to get out when he had a brain aneurysm. It's also Mark Cuban's birthday, Wesley Snipes' birthday, Fatboy Slim's birthday, Jim Core, And it's even J.K. Rowling's birthday. Now, I found myself late last night when I knew I should have been heading off to bed, reading The Great Harry Potter Hoax by Miles Mathis, I think is his name. Big, giant J.K. Rowling conspiracy theories about what she really is and where she comes from. Fascinating. It's also Dean Cain's birthday, Ben Chaplin's birthday, Zach Brown, and B.J. Novak of The Office. All those folks celebrating birthdays today. I don't know if any of those will make it into our daily DJ set at noon. It is a New Music Monday, and I did a little bit of work, and I've already got a banging new music episode to pump up the volume coming up a little bit later today on the stream at MediaMonarchy.com/listen. As an effort to wet that whistle, we are news and music. We're going to end this episode with the 30-plus year running of the church. They actually formed in Sydney, Australia in 1980, and they've got a brand new single from their forthcoming to-be-announced LP, and it is called Another Century from the Church. And that's how we wrap up the last morning monarchy of July. It is Monday, July 31st, 2017, and I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com, thanking you so much for listening and taking part. And reminding you, as always, my friends, don't hate the media, become the media. Take care.
For you, so you can see yourself in the dark. I gotta get a handle on you, and the hand will leave a mark. I gotta get directions off you. Yeah, could be anywhere. The night is a liar. Overthrow the tyrant. Overthrow the tyrant. When you ask yourself, why has this happened to me? Once or twice, something nice might have come of gotta fight a battle for you. Gotta back another century. Another night set for you. Every morning and everywhere. Today he's a liar. Undergo the silence. Undergo the silence. And in the fading light I saw, when you asked yourself,
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato. Since 2005, Media Monarchy has covered the real news about politics, health, technology, and the occult, all remixed with music and media that matters. Go to MediaMonarchy.com/support and become a monthly subscriber so you can help keep independent, non-commercial, alternative media going and growing. Thanks.